Listen closely, beloved. Nothing about this moment is accidental. The fact that your eyes are resting on these words right now is not coincidence, luck, or algorithm. It is alignment. Your spirit has been nudging you, whispering to you, trying to slow you down long enough to receive what heaven has been releasing. Even while you were asleep, when your body was still and your mind was quiet, the spiritual realm was active. There were shifts taking place. There were decisions being finalized. There were protections being arranged. And in ways you may not fully understand yet, you were at the center of it. There are sacred seasons in the life of the anointed where God becomes intensely personal, not louder to the world, but closer to you. These are the moments when divine attention rests so heavily on a person that even the unseen realm recognizes a transition is happening. You have entered one of those moments. That loneliness you've been feeling. It isn't random, that distance from people who once felt like home. It isn't a mistake. The silence, the stillness, the sense that you're walking alone while everyone else seems connected. It has purpose. You thought you were being left out, but you are actually being lifted away. You thought something was wrong, but something is being refined. This is not rejection. This is consecration. When God prepares someone for a new dimension, He often reduces the voices around them, so His voice becomes unmistakable. Some relationships could not survive where you are going. Some environments could not support who you are becoming. So gently, quietly, without dramatic announcements, God began to separate you, not to punish you, but to preserve you. There are prayers you prayed that required privacy to be answered. There are callings on your life that cannot grow in crowded spaces. You are not being isolated. You are being positioned. Before we go deeper, type "I am chosen" in the comments, not as a trend, but as agreement with what God is unfolding in your life. And if this message resonates in your spirit, make sure you like and subscribe, because confirmations often arrive in quiet ways, right on time. Now take a slow breath and open your heart, because now let's walk further down the Illuminate path. Point 1. Last night was a spiritual intervention. Listen closely, because this part requires you to quiet the logical mind for a moment and allow your spiritual awareness to come forward. Something happened while you were asleep. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way that your physical eyes could see, but in a subtle, authoritative way that only the spirit realm fully understands. Chosen ones often experience divine adjustments during sleep because that is when resistance is lowest. Your body rests, your conscious defenses soften, and your soul becomes more receptive to divine alignment. Last night was one of those alignment points. You may have woken up feeling different and not known why. Maybe you felt emotionally heavy for no clear reason. Maybe you felt unusually calm. Maybe certain thoughts about your life felt final, as if something inside you quietly decided, "I can't go back to who I was." That wasn't random. That was intervention. In the spirit realm, permissions can shift. Access can be removed. Attachments can be cut without a dramatic argument or visible event. Some connections that had spiritual clearance to influence your life no longer have that same access. Some delays that were allowed for your learning season are no longer permitted to follow you forward. This is why certain people feel distant now, without a fight. This is why some opportunities faded instead of flourishing. It feels confusing in the natural, but it is precise in the spiritual. Heaven is not chaotic. When God moves, it is measured, intentional, and timed. Angels witness these moments with awe because they understand the weight of destiny adjustments. They understand that when God personally intervenes in the timeline of one life, it is because that life carries purpose beyond the ordinary. And you, even if you don't fully believe it yet, are one of those lives. What feels like sudden disruption is actually divine editing. What feels like loss of control is actually protection from paths that would have drained your assignment. You weren't left unguarded last night. You were repositioned. Point 2. Your loneliness is divine isolation, not abandonment. The loneliness you feel has a different texture than ordinary loneliness. It's not just the absence of people, it's the absence of resonance. You can be around others and still feel unseen, unheard, energetically separate. Conversations that once felt normal now feel exhausting. Small talk feels heavier than silence. You try to connect, but something inside you pulls back, almost as if your spirit refuses to fully attach. This is not social failure. This is spiritual isolation. Before elevation, there is separation, not as punishment, but as preparation. When a person is being moved into a higher level of purpose, their environment has to change first. But instead of moving you physically right away, God often moves you energetically. You begin to feel out of place long before you physically relocate. This creates the loneliness phase. It feels like being between worlds. You don't belong where you used to fit, but you haven't yet arrived where you will belong. This in-between space is uncomfortable, but it is sacred. It is where old emotional dependencies break. It is where your need for constant validation weakens. It is where you learn to sit with yourself without distraction. If certain people had remained emotionally close during this phase, you would lean on them instead of leaning into God's guidance. So distance became necessary, not because you are unworthy of love, but because you are being trained to draw strength from a deeper source. The pain of loneliness is real, but it is also purposeful. It strips away the illusion that your identity depends on who stays around. It teaches you to recognize your own spiritual presence. And slowly, without you noticing, you become more grounded, more discerning, less desperate for noise. This is not abandonment. This is refinement through quiet. Point 3. The spiritual realm recognizes your identity before you do. One of the most disorienting parts of being chosen is realizing that the spiritual realm responds to your identity long before your mind is able to accept it. You may still look at your life and see delays, flaws, unfinished healing, or unanswered questions. You may judge yourself by your current bank account, your relationships, or your emotional ups and downs. But none of those measurements define you in the unseen realm. There, your spiritual signature is already recognized, already registered, and already understood. That is why opposition often shows up before visible success. That is why resistance can feel strangely intense, even when you believe you are just starting or not ready yet. The pushback is not a reaction to who you have been. It is a reaction to who you are in the process of becoming. Recent spiritual shifts have not been random emotional waves. They have been identity upgrades. This is why older versions of you feel like they are dissolving. Habits that once felt natural now feel heavy. Conversations you once entertained now feel draining. Places that once felt familiar now feel restrictive. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding survival-based identities that helped you cope in past seasons, but cannot carry your calling forward. The discomfort you feel is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of expansion. Real growth rarely feels like instant confidence. More often, It feels like standing on ground that is still forming beneath your feet, learning to trust what you cannot fully see yet. But heaven is not uncertain about you. Your potential is not a possibility in the spirit. It is an established fact. What feels like pressure in your life right now is actually compression before release. Like a seed buried underground, you are being pressed on every side so you break open in the right direction. While you question yourself, the unseen realm is already aligned around your purpose. Protection has increased, not because you are fragile, but because timing is sacred. You are not being hidden because you are insignificant. You are being preserved because your moment is approaching. Point 4. Delays were divine detours, not denials. You have spent time wondering why certain things didn't work out, why that relationship ended, why that opportunity fell through, why progress felt slower for you than for others. Comparison made it worse. Watching people move ahead while you stayed in place created the illusion that you were forgotten. But delay is not always denial. Sometimes it is a detour. A detour is not a sign that the destination changed. It is a sign that the original route was unsafe. Some of the things you thought you wanted would have locked you into environments that drained your spiritual growth. Some connections that felt promising would have required you to shrink yourself to maintain them. Some successes would have come at the cost of your peace. You didn't see the long-term consequences, but heaven did. So the door didn't open. Or it opened briefly and then closed. Or it never showed up at all. That wasn't rejection. That was redirection. Last night reinforced the fact that your timeline has been guarded more than you realize. The detours you experienced kept you aligned with a path that fits who you are becoming, not just who you were. It's difficult to trust detours while you're in them, because they feel like being lost. But looking back, you may already see patterns where what felt like a setback protected you from something that would have cost you more later. That is how divine protection often works. Quiet, preventative, and misunderstood, until hindsight brings clarity. Point 5. Your sensitivity is spiritual discernment. You feel deeply, and that depth has always set you apart in ways you couldn't fully explain. You walk into a room and instantly sense the emotional temperature, the unspoken tension, and the hidden sadness behind polite smiles. You notice the pause before someone answers, the slight shift in tone, and the energy drop when certain names are mentioned. Crowded, loud environments don't just tire you physically. They overwhelm you energetically, leaving you needing silence to recover. For years, you may have labeled this as being too sensitive, too emotional, or socially out of place, especially in a world that rewards loudness and surface-level interaction. But what you carry is not fragility, it is discernment. It is an internal guidance system designed to alert you to misalignment long before your logical mind gathers evidence. As your life moves into a more protected and purposeful season, this discernment becomes sharper and more precise. You begin noticing what feels off almost immediately. Conversations that once seemed normal now feel forced. Invitations that look good on the outside feel heavy in your body. Your tolerance for shallow or performative connections quietly decreases. When something isn't right, your body responds with subtle tightness, fatigue, or a quiet urge to withdraw. This is not random anxiety. It is your spirit recognizing what your mind has not yet processed. Recent spiritual strengthening has amplified this inner radar, and you may find yourself naturally pulling back from people, places, and habits you once tolerated. Not with drama, not with anger, and not with explanations you feel pressured to give, but with calm distance. Your spirit simply loses interest in what no longer aligns with where you are being led. To others, this may look like you're becoming distant or different, but internally you're becoming clearer, more anchored, and more honest with yourself. Discernment is one of the key tools given to those who carry purpose. It protects you from walking into situations that appear promising, but carry hidden costs. It gently guides you toward peace, even when the path feels unfamiliar or lonely at first. Learning to trust this sensitivity instead of criticizing it is part of your growth. This is not a flaw you need to fix. It is a signal you are learning to follow. Point 6. The silence in your life is making space for divine direction. Notice how quiet things have become. Fewer constant conversations, fewer invitations, fewer distractions demanding your attention. At first, this silence can feel heavy, like something is missing, like life has somehow shrunk. But silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes it is preparation. Noise keeps you externally focused, always reacting, always adjusting, always performing. Silence turns your attention inward and upward. When your life was louder, it was harder to hear subtle guidance. Your energy was scattered across other people's needs, moods, and expectations. Now, with less noise, your awareness is returning to you. You are beginning to notice your own inner voice again. The quiet, spiritual nudges that were always there, but drowned out. This is where direction becomes clearer. Not through dramatic signs or sudden miracles, but through a steady, growing clarity about what feels aligned and what does not, what drains you and what quietly strengthens you. Silence also reveals what you've been avoiding, feelings you buried under busyness, questions you postponed because you were too occupied, dreams you told yourself could wait. Without distraction, you meet yourself more honestly. That can feel uncomfortable, even unsettling, because you can no longer escape your own truth. But this is how alignment deepens. This is how you shed layers that were never truly you. The recent shift you felt supported this quieter phase. It was not random. You are not being left with nothing to do. You are being given sacred space to recalibrate. In that recalibration, your priorities reorganize, your desires become more authentic, and your path begins to feel less like pressure and more like quiet conviction. New direction forms here, slowly and naturally. Not rushed, not forced, not driven by fear of missing out, but shaped by inner certainty. And when movement comes again, and it will feel different. You will act with more peace, more confidence, and less need for external validation. Your steps will be fewer, but more precise. Your yes will be clearer. Your no will come without guilt. Because this time, your movement will rise from clarity, not noise, from alignment, not expectation. Point 7. You are entering a season of restricted access and elevated protection. As your life aligns more closely with your purpose, access to you begins to change in quiet but undeniable ways. Not everyone will feel as close as before, and not every invitation will feel right to accept anymore. Conversations that once felt natural may now feel heavy, and environments that once felt familiar may suddenly feel misaligned. Not every person will be able to understand where you're going, because growth often creates a language that only those on a similar path can fully hear. This is not about superiority or ego. It is about stewardship. Your energy, your time, and your emotional space are becoming more valuable resources because they are now tied to a larger assignment, one that requires clarity, strength, and discernment. Protection increases when purpose intensifies. You may notice that some people drift away without conflict, as if an unseen hand gently rearranged the distance. Others may misunderstand you and step back, unable to reconcile the old version of you with who you are becoming. Some doors simply stop opening, not because you failed, but because they no longer lead where you are meant to go. It can feel like your world is getting smaller, quieter, and more contained. But in reality, it is becoming more focused, more intentional, and more refined. Distractions lose access, draining dynamics fall away. What remains and what enters next will be more aligned with your calling, your values, and your future. Last night marked a reinforcement of this protected season, a spiritual boundary drawn not to isolate you forever, but to stabilize you for what's ahead. You are being positioned carefully, like someone being placed exactly where they need to stand before the curtain rises. Your steps are being guided more closely than you realize, even in the pauses, even in the waiting. Even when you feel alone, you are not unsupported. Even when the path feels narrow, it is intentional, designed to keep you focused and moving with precision. This phase is not the end of connection. It is the preparation for the right connections. And when they arrive, they will not distract you from your purpose or compete with your calling. They will recognize it, respect it, and walk with you inside it.